Welcome to Discover the Difference, a podcast brought to you by C3. My name's Jamie Reed. Today, Gabe and I have on one of the most interesting guys I think we've ever sat down with in Prime Hall. Prime is a Marine Raider, near and dear to Gabe and I's heart. They were the first Special Force group that brought us in and taught us everything we know. So naturally, we knew we were going to love his story. It's one full of overcoming a lot of obstacles, from living on his own at a very, very young age to going to military academy, barely graduating, having a very difficult time in the Marine Corps finding his place, but eventually getting on track and really doing it through a mentor and fitness. He goes on to just excel with the Marine Raiders. And then he founded Deepwater Fitness, and get this, the Underwater Torpedo League, sort of like water polo meets rugby, all underwater. It's absolutely insane. He leads high-end athletes and professionals around the country in the most unique way. You're gonna love this high-energy, unique story about overcoming obstacles with Prime Hall.
I'm excited to have you because the very first military group that pulled Gabe and I in was the Marine Raiders, and our friends with MARSOC happened just kind of incidentally. But since then, we've become pretty involved with different special forces. And so you have a really interesting background around that and how you've extracted that to serve in a leadership capacity. But before we get to that, let's talk about who you are a little bit from South Texas. What was life like growing up? What'd you do? Did you always know that you were going to go into the military, or how did that unpack?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. And this place is awesome. Growing up, I actually just got back from Texas. So I just went on like the homecoming tour of all the places I grew up. But I grew up, I like to joke about it, on the mean streets of Corpus Christi, Texas. Which most people, if you think of Texas, the first thing that comes to your mind might be a ranch or something like that, and cattle and that. But Corpus Christi is unique in that it's also known as North Padre Island, and it's connected to that. So there's an actual bridge that leads to an island, and so it's like it's a lot of island life, and being on the water. And so I grew up being in the ocean all the time, and then also being in the pool. And my grandmother that I grew up a lot with, Barbara, she was a synchronized swimmer growing up. So she loved the water. And so she would always have me, in all these little...
First, can you synchronize swim?
No. No.
I've always wondered, how does somebody get into that?
Yeah, no, and
So did you learn how to swim like an early age? Like, was it like a YMCA class or?
no, it's just being in the water.
Okay.
And being comfortable in the water and really loving that. And, I remember in elementary school, the first thing I would do every summer once I got out of school is just, check into the neighborhood pool, and then I would be there pretty much every day. So the water was always kind of my thing. I was never on a swim team or any of that. And then I really got into it later when I got into the Marine Corps. I went to a military water survival instructor course. And that's where I got a lot of the technical aspects of swimming. And then as I was awaiting to go into Marine Raiders, I got positioned at a pool on Camp Pendleton where I was a water survival instructor, and I was running just thousands and thousands of Marines through training. Over that time, I was initially only supposed to be there for like a month, and I ended up there for a year. And I was a young Marine at the time, so I didn't really see the value of what I was getting, but I just got a lot of pattern recognition and reps working with all these different Marines. And my goal at the time was anybody that came through that I was like put to certify them on something, right? Even if it was like the bare minimum qualification, I always wanted them to at least get that, right? I never wanted to have to take them to the window and sign them out that they were not qualified and that they didn't meet the standard. And so the only thing that would get in the way usually is their fear, right? Their fear of the water, or the fear of the 30-foot high tower that a lot of the requirements where they had to jump off that. And so
I see.
I had to safely guide them through these processes. And I learned very early on that, you know, because my first instinct, for example, up on the 30-foot high tower is if someone's scared of heights, which I grew up scared of heights as well. I have my own story for that. But if someone's unsafe at 30 feet and they do something like grab the rail, well, you have to throw them off, because the last thing that you want is for them to loop around that rail and then fall and hit their head on the concrete.
Right.
So if you see that they do something unsafe at the last minute, you have to launch them. And so
That sounds like fun.
right.
Yeah. What drove you? Just kind of going backward a little bit. What drove you in the first place to join the Marines?
So I went to a Marine Military Academy.
That's a pretty good food.
Yeah.
So your parents said this is what's going to be good for you, or were you like a troublemaker?
No, so a little bit of
Way to label.
Because usually isn't that what what usually goes to these
100%.
academies?
Yeah, most people, I would say like 90. So there is it is also a prep school. So it's a great feeder program to go into all different, if you want to go to an elite school, college or anything like that, it's a good prep school. So there's a very small percentage of people that are going in that capacity, and they're like learning to fly planes while they're there. And they're like, I mean, high level stuff that they have special programs. But the majority of people that are going there are being sent against their will, and they got in trouble. And either their parents are like, you know, we're done with you, we're ready to be empty nesters, and they're like, drop them off. Or, you know, they got in trouble and they're like, this is your punishment. You're going to be here for X amount of 1 to X amount of years. But for me, my parents had divorced, right when I was going into high school. So right before, when my 8th grade year was finishing middle school, my parents separated. My mom moved away, and then me and my dad moved into like a new place, and then my dad moved out, never really lived there. So then I ended up living by myself at a young age for a couple of years. And
Just you have any siblings?
yeah, I had a younger sister. She moved down with my mom.
Oh, okay.
And so they moved down to South Padre Island, and they lived down there.
When you say your dad moved out, like bounced or?
Yeah, so he was basically living, you know, he's now single, and so he's like lives with his girlfriend, or he lived, you know, at these different places. And so I ended up being there by myself. And
What was that like as an 8th grader?
I mean, it's really like, you know, like when I went to military school, I volunteered to go because I had been by myself for a couple of years, and it's scary when you're by yourself. And there's no rules. So some people, like, you know, people that would find out about my situation that were my friends, they thought it was cool, or, you know, they thought, because it's like you're home alone, you know. But it wasn't that cool. So that's what I loved about military school, is that one, it gave me protection because nobody can come onto the campus is locked down. So that made me feel safe.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't feel safe living in my own condo or apartment or whatever, all the places I live by myself.
In 8th grade, that'd be the age of your son now, huh?
Yeah, close.
That's crazy to think, right? Like that kid just be living in a house by themselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you know, obviously in a first world, but like still having to figure out ways to get food and get myself to school and like do all that stuff. And so I ended up I got a vehicle. My grandparents had an extra like hunting vehicle that I got when I was like 14. Started driving myself, and then
In Texas, you can drive at 14, no problem.
yeah, well, I could drive, and I was doing my hardship training, and then because right when I turned 15, I got a hardship license.
Okay.
So
That gives you a license if you don't have any other way to get around.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a hardship license. Immediately when I turned 15. But so I was pretty self-sufficient. But what happened is my grandparents came into town one summer to take us on a trip. They always took us on all these different places to show us different cultures around the world. And they came and saw my living situation, and they were like, we had no idea that you've been living by yourself and how long this has been going on. And so, and that summer we happened to go to San Antonio, Texas, you know, cause like back then it was a big deal for us to go to like Fiesta, Texas and SeaWorld and all this stuff where, you know, like my kids here like have gone to SeaWorld, you know, 4 times in a week before or something,
Right.
you know. So, but it was a big deal. So we would go to San Antonio sometimes for vacation. My grandparents, there was a Texas Military Institute. So there were these kids that were all in uniform, and they looked like they had, you know, like they were all buddies, and, you know, they looked like they were, you know, going somewhere, had purpose. And I was like, man, I wish I could do something like that. Well, so then my grandparents took note of that, and they went home, and close to them is the Marine Military Academy down in South Texas. And so they went and basically got it all laid out and then offered me to go. So I went on this tour, and I mean, you know, my grandparents, I think it was like 15 grand a year or something at the time to send me.
It's a
So
lot back then.
it's a big deal from
Flat out, I mean.
yeah, from having no support, and then like, you know, they're showing me, hey, you like working out in the gym. Well, you're gonna have access to this and this and this. Here's the cafeteria, like it's buffet, and there's this, and I'm just like, man. So no brainer.
It was like a moment, like
Yeah.
that was like a life changing
Yeah.
moment.
Huge life changing. Like, yeah.
Well, you referenced that some people would go there to fly planes or other, you know, highly technical skill sets. Did you participate in anything like that that was outside of the curriculum?
No. I did have, as one of my classes in school, I had strength and conditioning. And so I actually got like, one of the football coaches was my strength and conditioning coach. And I got like really high level training for strength and conditioning, at that age. And that was to me a big deal. But other than that, you know, I really didn't maximize it. You know, some people got into the boxing program there that was really high level. Some people got into the flying the planes. There was a big ROTC element to it. So like if people were really wanting to go and have these, you know, illustrious military careers, they were participating in like the higher level ROTC stuff that was going on. At that time, I had no interest in going into the military. But I think that, you know, the word people don't like is brainwashing or indoctrination. But it's like when I was sitting in some of these classes, they would have these videos of these guys that their face are painted and they're crawling through the jungle. You know, they've got the knife and the thing, and it's like basically like all the games you played when you were a kid.
Yeah.
But it's brought to life, and it's like, all right, so there's something that kind of hooked me to that. And so, so anyway, after high school, I got into, I was working down in South Padre Island, which at the time was one of the main spring break spots and very seasonal. So spring break and summer went off, and then the rest of the year was, you know, doing other stuff. But I was involved in that for enough to kind of rack up some charges and get in with the wrong people and stuff. So my grandfather had gone and made a deal with the judge, that he had like a relation to, that got me out of all my charges, got me out of my big charges, and in exchange, I would be going to the Marine Corps. So I basically got a get out of jail free card and then went into the Marine Corps. So a lot of people, when they tell me, hey, thank you for your service and everything, I tell them like, hey, thank you, but I just want you to know that, like, you know, when I went in, I really just went in, one, to make my grandparents proud. That's all I wanted to do. And then two, it was a get out of jail free card. So instead of me going to jail, I went into the Marines. And so,
Did you make them proud?
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit. People are a little bit more familiar with the selection process into like the SEAL teams and things like that. But the Marine Raiders, being a special force with the Marines, what was your introduction to that group like? And can you talk a little bit about what that selection process is like? Because I think it's much lesser known.
Yeah. So when we came out, and a lot of, you know, Marine Raiders is modern day Marine Raiders is pretty new. We did have Raiders in World War II, but after World War II, they got disbanded and they got sent back to regular units. And so it wasn't up until like 2006 that they started a test pilot to see if it would be feasible to start a special operations unit in the Marine Corps. And then it all kind of went from there. So I came in 2005. So there was nothing, no MARSOC, no nothing. And then all I remember is 2 years in, like when I came back from my first deployment, they were saying, hey, there's a new unit that's starting. Some of you guys are going to get, pulled to get a briefing on it. But I wasn't allowed to go to the briefings at that time because I was still recovering from being in trouble my first couple of years. Then I got into massive trouble and
In the
almost
Marines?
got kicked out. Yeah.
So you labeled them accurately, I guess,
Yeah.
after all.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I grew up with no authority. So I had big authority problems. And so when I went into the Marines my first couple of years, I still didn't know how to play the game. And, and I would basically get, I'm always outside the box. And so I would get frustrated that, oh, well, how we do this? Why are we doing this? Well, it's because we've always done it that way. And that's how we do it. So stop asking questions. Well, there's no innovation in that, right? It doesn't even make common sense that we're doing something. We're standing in a formation for hours because this is what we do as Marines and this is what we've always done. It's like, well, this is a waste of time, right? So it was all that stuff, but going into Raiders was like a breakthrough moment on all fronts, because it was like all the dumb stuff that I experienced in the Marines. And then all on top of that, all of the talkers, because everybody likes to talk. And then, I'd already been to Iraq and I had seen that a lot of the guys that were talkers, they were the biggest liability when it really came down to meaningful times for them to show up. And that was like, oh, dude, I just need to get away from these guys that just chirp. They just talk. It's just nothing but noise. There's no signal.
It's very similar to the business world, I feel like, too. The people who are actually doing the shit out there that don't have to talk.
Right. So I had enough bad experiences from being in the conventional Marine Corps that when I got the opportunity to go to selection, I was like, I will literally I will go through a flaming building to never go back to where I just came. I don't care what it takes. I'm never going back. And so I went in with that mindset, and that's the kind of mindset that you have to have with selection. Or, since I've been out for 8 years, I've gotten to work with pretty much athletes at the top of every sport, preparing for different competitions, from UFC champions to Olympians to this and that. And so, it's for selection. It's the same thing. It's, you don't know, you're basically committing that you're going to go up this staircase, right? And you're going to make it to the top no matter what. But you're also knowing that it's the hardest thing that you've ever done. And you have no idea what that's going to be like to climb that staircase, and how many stairs you're going to be missing, and like what type of things that you're going to have to do and hold on. And then, all these different things that no matter what, you're still going to make it to the top, and you have no idea what the route looks like. And it's like 100%. That's the mindset that you have to
bring
have.
the shits.
Yeah, exactly.
Where does that mindset come from? Is that you think that's nature or nurture in your experience?
I think that we all have it. But I do believe that, different situations that have conditioned us to be ready for those moments, And so for me, I had, different situations like early in life where, scary or scarcity or abuse or these things that kind of conditioned me. But then before I went into Raiders, I had a mental focus trainer that I worked out with for like 4 years before I went. Pretty much the whole time I was in the Marine Corps before I went, I had linked up with this guy, and he was in La Jolla, and I would go down after all my training in the Marine Corps at the end of the day, and I would go down and do these crazy workouts with this guy.
How did that happen?
I was friends with this girl, and, it basically came up that like, hey, because I stopped drinking 2 years into my Marine Corps experience because I had gotten in so much trouble.
It wasn't Robert, right?
Huh?
It wasn't Robert Owens?
No.
Yeah.
No, it was a different. So I had gotten, conditioned with training to where, I would go down at the end of my day and I would do these 5 or 6 hour workouts with this guy. And he would basically, the longer that I worked with him over years, the more he would like challenge me mentally and like really try to push me over the edge. And so I would do harder and harder workouts, and they would always end with holding out a 7-pound stick, right, for unlimited time. And this is like, I'm like,
standing.
yeah. And I'm a young Marine at that time, like, young man, very impatient person. And then I'm starting this stick thing at like 10:30 at night. And I still have an hour drive back to Camp Pendleton. I have to be up at 5:30 in the morning. So all these things would go through my head and I would start to get very frustrated and feel like I couldn't do it. And then I would have these breakthrough moments every time with the stick where at a certain point, like after 30 minutes or after a thing of all this, like, I'm like, feel like I'm losing my mind, that all of those other things, all those tabs in my mind, like a computer, all of them would shut off. And I would just be singularly focused on holding the stick out.
That's the longest you ever held it.
I don't know, but I definitely did like over an hour.
That's a long time.
But what happens is
7 pounds is pretty legit.
But what happens is you go into this crazy focused and relaxated state that you're basically in the zone and there's nothing that can. So my trainer would be like, hey, you're done. Because like at the beginning, I would be praying to be done. Like, I just want this to be done. I can't do it. But then at a certain point, once you lock in, well, then he would have to come and lower the stick and be like, hey, relax. Because I'd be like, nah.
And during that time, like, do you have a vision yet of being a Marine Raider or like?
I was going to, I was going.
Okay, so you were doing it to work towards something?
At first, I was doing it just to push myself and see how far I could go because once I stopped drinking, fitness and like training and pushing myself became like my hobby and my,
you supplemented
my
that.
outlet.
That was your new addiction.
Right. Exactly. So I was just pushing that, and then, at a certain point, once I had recovered, in the Marine Corps, I started getting opportunities where they're like, because people could see that I was outworking people like by like 5 or 10 times, because everybody's going back to play video games and I'm going back for another 6-hour beat down.
A lot.
And so, and it was, but I'm doing this on a regular basis. And I also would do things like when we would go on a hike, we go on these hellacious hikes on Fridays. We'd get there at 4 a.m. We take off, at 4:45, we go on this 10K crazy hike at Camp Pendleton, or maybe up to 20K and then come back. And then whenever we get back, it's like, noon or something like that on Friday. Well, everybody's dead and like cramped out and just, messed up from the hike. Well, I would immediately change and just go work out, And so it was like, so when all these people are, that it just, but it was more of a mindset thing too. And it was like, just, keep shifting. But I wouldn't have gotten there if I didn't get in trouble. Like I got in trouble so much my first, year and a half that I had a heavy isolation time, where I was restricted and everybody else wasn't. And that really, like, whatever it is about being isolated with yourself, that you have these conversations that maybe you would have never had the opportunity to have if you're just cruising with everyone else.
Well, create some space, right?
Exactly.
You just nothing else to do but sit with that thought.
Yeah.
So you're at some point, it sounds like you quit alcohol. You had some kind of turning point. What was it that kind of switched that in your brain to say, I'm going in a different direction?
I mean,
he was sitting in that room with himself for hours.
Yeah. Well, it was when I made the decision, or the light bulb moment was, I'd been on restriction for over a year. And on my first deployment, it was supposed to be a 6-month deployment to like Okinawa. And we go to all these places in South Korea, Philippines, Australia, train all these militaries, and then we come home. Well, it ended up being a year. And so when I went there, I was on the highest restriction going to Okinawa. So they ended up just, when they extended it, I was pretty much on restriction for that whole year. Now, I had gotten off maybe at like month 8 or something like that. They let me off restriction finally.
When you're in Okinawa on restriction, does that mean you can't leave the base and things like that?
You can't leave the base. And
all your social life is locked down.
You have to check in with this duty every 2 hours, and you can't drink, and you can't go out, and you can't. So the only thing that you can do is work out. That's the only thing. So you're basically just.
I've seen the barracks in Okinawa. Yeah. It's not pretty if you're just stuck inside that.
No, but you just condition yourself, and humans can adapt to anything in a couple of weeks. But it's not the best conditions. But so anyway, I'd gotten off for just a very short time, and then it just happened to be that I went out at this Camp Hansen Fest, which is like the Camp Hansen on Okinawa is where we were at, and they had this big festival, and it was my first opportunity to drink. So only after like a couple drinks, I blacked out, and then I don't remember everything that transpired after. But basically, I disrespected, a high-ranking person and had like a physical dispute with them over and over again. And then when I woke up in the morning, I had like all my high-ranking people that were all in the room,
Oh man.
and they're like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, I've been on restriction for almost a year. I just got off. And by the way, like all my stuff at work was great. Like I was about to get meritoriously promoted and to Lance Corporal, which is just E3. So it's private first class. But for me, I gotten busted all the way down before. So this was a big deal, and I'd climb back up. And then so now when I got busted down this time, because I had a meritorious Lance Corporal, so I was about to get promoted, I lost 2 ranks.
Oh.
And I got so everything taken. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, and I got everybody looking at me like I just erased like a year and a half of just straight performance, right? Or over a year, right? And so I just made the decision because that's the one thing I can control. So luckily I made that decision, and then that was a transformation.
So that was it? Last drink you had was that?
No, I wish I could say that. But I ended up going 10 years in the Marine Corps. And then I got blown up in Afghanistan, so I ended up getting medically retired. And but I didn't know I was going to get medically retired until they found that I had a hole in my right ear, and I couldn't pass my dive physical anymore.
Is that tinnitus or what is it?
No, it's just from the explosions. I had some damage in my right ear.
I saw you were wearing a
Yeah.
fuse.
Yeah, I wear them just for noise management. But yeah, I was in a pretty big explosion in Afghanistan in 2012.
Were you pretty extensive injuries?
Yeah, I mean, at the time it was, I still had my arms and legs, and, that was like, I couldn't say that for all my buddies that I was with. So at the time it was just invisible stuff that was bothering me. So I got knocked unconscious. I got hit with a couple rocket propelled grenades in a close distance. That was basically one of my Afghan Special Forces guys that I lived with. Turned on us and tried to kill everybody in the camp.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So it was during the height of the green on blues or the insider attacks in Afghanistan. And basically it just happened overnight. Like we went from not having it to having it just everywhere. So, I still stayed in for, 5 years after that. And it wasn't until they found those things like 4 years later that I got separated out. So,
Was that hard?
definitely, yeah, getting, cause I was still trying to stay in, and, a lot of, just like a lot of other jobs, a lot of your identity is wrapped up into being a Marine Raider, or, everybody in Marine Raiders, you have these specialized skills that you have, right? The way that you add value to the team is that if they need this, they go to you, right? And so I had that version of that. For me was human intelligence. And so I had gotten to go to all these human intelligence courses to where I became, out of maybe a handful or 2 handfuls of people, someone that had a capability that I thought was special. And so I was very tied into that whole identity of all of that. And I remember going into the medical director or the medical officer's office one day in the morning, and at that point I was about to deploy again to the Philippines and like work out of the embassy and kind of do a different role. And he was like, I want you to know that right now you're like trying to hold on to the door. And I want you to know that I'm just ripping you the F off. And that when you walk out of here, you're done with your job. You're not checking back into your team. You're going up to the S3 office. That's your new job. And then you're on medical review board till you're out. Because if I deploy you the Marine Corps is going to look at you like you're fit for duty, and I promise you, you're not. And so
That's an abrupt end.
Huh?
That's an abrupt end.
Right. So it was like, boom. And then I went up, and I remember, all my guys from my team that were coming up to me at my new cubicle, and they were like, no way. Like, and it's like, yeah, dude, there's nothing I can do, bro. They pulled me, and so then it was like that. And then like after a few days, well, then like all the guys that I was on the team with, now they've been up for a few days, or now they've, they're still in the same requirements where now I'm working like 8 to 5. So people start looking at me like,
Resentment or
you're not,
something?
well, no, it's just like, you're not part of the pack anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Second class now.
Yeah. And then I was like, I noticed that people were treating me differently whenever I was on my medical board. And it wasn't like I put myself on the medical board.
It wasn't
right?
voluntary.
And so, but I noticed that I was receiving different treatment. And so I went to some of the people that I trusted and asked them, and they're like, yeah, if you really want to know, like, we look at you like a liability with all your health stuff. So like, we don't look at you like an operator and all that. And I remember that being the like, all right, I gotta set my life up outside of this, because this isn't my life anymore.
Was there any, as you're in that intelligence kind of area, was there any desire, or did you ever get recruited to the CIA, or?
I mean, it was definitely a desire. And at a lot of the courses, I got to, a lot of my, people, my instructors and my role players and the people that like I worked closely with, they were, 30-year case officers from the agency and all that stuff. So there was always a pathway to do that.
You're a little too muscular to be in the CIA. I've never met a guy that's jacked in the CIA.
No, but
Well, Ralph's pretty muscular. Sure.
yeah. And the other thing was, I felt like I had really good experiences working overseas with different cultures and different people. And Afghanistan was like a good one. Like, the insider attack was not a good example of it, but the guys, when that team that turned on us, they had just been replaced with our other team that we had there. So we had just gotten them days before. So we hadn't fully,
Like integrated with him?
yeah, we hadn't fully been able to see who's who in the zoo and what the threat is. But I felt like with everybody that I ended up working with, because I ended up having, I ran an Afghan local police force in Afghanistan where I had like 80 guys that were basically like Taliban, but our Taliban that worked with us in the local side, that any of them could have turned on me any day. And it was like basically the relationship that I kept with all of them, and like cause like I treated my Afghans like they were my family, like I broke myself off to always make sure that they had food, water, ammunition, weapons, like anything they needed if they were being attacked. And then, when things would happen, like would cover any funeral thing, like just, I would always go above and beyond with all of them. And so, but what I've learned is like, since I've gotten back, I've been out of the military now for 8 years. And it's really that when being overseas, especially in a life and death situation, it's really black and white. Yeah, there's a little gray area where it's like, oh, do I fully trust this guy that I could turn my back and he's not going to try to kill me? There's some of that. But other than that, everything's pretty much black and white. Whereas when you get back here and it's not life and death, that's where I've had like my biggest challenges with what I thought I knew about people, all the stuff I learned in my courses. Like I've seen it all completely flip like a million different ways. And so it's really hard for, one of the hardest aspects of it, since being back, is basically figuring out how to work with all different types of people in this culture when it's not life and death.
Yeah.
Right. But people perceive it as life and death because they don't have that reference point.
That's different perspective.
But then also I perceive it as life and death because I have to remind my mind every time, if I look at my phone and I have 20 messages and then I look and it's like, hey, you've been dark, you haven't hit me up for a while. And then they say, and I'm like, who is this? And it's like, and then, or my emails or all that stuff, like I have to remind my mind, hey, like I'm not in the village right now, like under attack. Like we're in first world country. These are first world problems. Just relax, right? And like breathe, focus,
Did you do any kind of transition program like Honor Foundation or anything like that?
No, I love the Honor Foundation. I actually got to do a panel with them last week with my mentor, Derek Carrera.
Oh, I saw a couple of the guys. The cohort just came through here on Tuesday. They trekked
really?
through on Tuesday,
Yeah, last Tuesday.
like 2 days ago.
Oh, this week.
Yeah.
Or was that yesterday? It was 2 days ago.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Because last Tuesday I was with them at the HQ down
Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet.
Actually, I was thinking about that cohort. I give it a little bit of time before I like post something about them, but they were a really engaging group of people, asking some really good questions. I had a long conversation with a guy that I saw that we're mutually connected with on, and it just reminded me of like how human, like we think of these war fighters as war fighters, but like so human too,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad that you guys are getting them to come here, and
Yeah.
and the reason why I meet with them is because, I've had close to 10 guys, check out, take their own life that were in the wars that then came back and couldn't integrate back into society. And so,
So you're playing a coaching role with them in that mental transition, or?
well, I'm going there as an entrepreneur,
Okay.
but while I'm there, I'm telling them about like the realities of like the mental health side. Cause, like I've gotten myself, where I've ended up in the hospital twice since I've been out just from stress from work, where I overworked myself and I wasn't properly managing my health. And so it got to a certain point, and then, I've had obviously buddies that took their own life because there were certain aspects of what they of the path that they had chosen, but a lot of them didn't know how to surrender. They didn't know how to quit. So like they'll just go. That's why it's so critical to meet that type of group when they're in transition, because you can give them some of this guidance and some of these, maybe plant some seeds that might show them, hey, here's the minefield, right, that I've seen. And maybe you can avoid some of these if you just, maybe take a pause before you make that decision of, well, I'm going to go to this place because they're going to pay me twice as much, right? But that place that's going to pay you twice as much, that might be golden handcuffing yourself to something that you're missing out on, an opportunity cost, even being an intern with this place that might open it up. But I think that the biggest thing that I've seen, especially with special operations or any military that's transitioning, is you look at the risk tolerance that you accepted when you were in, right? And it's like, please just accept a tiny sliver of that for yourself when you're getting out. Meaning like, take the time to, okay, here's a blank piece of paper. This is all of the opportunities that I have with everything that I have from my military job and experience and network. Okay, here's a blank piece of paper. Where do my passions and interests intersect with who I really am? Sometimes you need space when you get out to like basically figure out what you assimilate with, what you actually like, because like everything that I did when I was assigned, I signed my name to go into Raiders, but then like I'm always assigned to a group of people, and we all, found a way to make it work. But it's like, now when I'm not assigned to anybody, who is it that I really want to put myself around? What's the type of music that I actually like? All these different things. And then what brings me passion. So
It's interesting because we talk, it's an hour-long program, right? Like you're familiar with the treks where they go through, and there's 6 that day, and they do 3 days of it. And so we're the last one. Imagine at the end of your 6th one of a full day, you're going to go to an insurance agency. But we bring a bunch of people in. We have people cheering for them as they come in. And if, we have beer and margaritas, Coke, waters, we make it a much more light atmosphere. But what we do, we talk about insurance on 5 slides for about 2 minutes. But we talk a lot about storytelling, because a lot of the people that are on special force teams are team people, not individuals. And the value of understanding your own story, your identity before you're in the special forces, while you're in it, and after you're in it, and then authenticity. And one of the challenges is trying to identify what is that organization you may go into. When you're in any sort of military operation, you know what you're getting into to some extent. It's pretty well defined. Yeah. When you're interviewing with a life science company or a drone manufacturer or a consultant, you don't really know who they are, what that culture is going to be like, and how well those two are going to integrate. So I think what you're saying of just, hey, hit the pause button here for a second, do that work, which is what the Honor Foundation is there for, right? Is to help them do that. And I've had a couple personal friends watch, like we advocated one of them to go through it. I never thought this guy would do it, and he did.
And then he went to work for an LGBTQ organization, and he was one of the most
hardline Navy SEAL guys I ever met. And I'm like, why did you take that? And he's like, I decided I needed to challenge myself to think completely different than I ever have. And I was like, I'm really proud that you did that. But had he not gone through that process, that never would have happened.
Right.
Yeah, how did you do that for yourself? What was that experience like? Because you mentioned you had some, went to some tough places. How did you now, today, now you're, followed that passion piece and mixing that with your experience? What does that look like today?
Yeah. So, I had, when I was in like my kind of transition, I got on a bunch of medications during my, medical retirement. And, cause I got diagnosed with all these different things. And then, and I wasn't taking all my medications, but I was at least taking 7 or 8 or something like that. And, it basically turned me into a zombie. So, my wife would find me like on the couch in the morning after I took my meds in the morning, and I would just be like sitting on the couch, like zoning out. And I was like, I remember that being a wake up call to me, because I remember even like in the military, if we had been up for, a week and we had a commander come in and brief us on something, well, guess what? Like, it doesn't matter how much sleep we've gotten. Nobody's passing out during this important mission brief or whatever it is, right? And so but every time that there was someone passing out, it would be like, hey, wake up, dude. What's wrong with you, right? In any kind of setting like that, my whole military. So I kind of looked at myself like, it's like, I'm just passing out in life now, you know what I mean? And it was the meds. So first thing I needed to do was get off of the meds. And I got, at the same time, was when kind of psychedelic assisted therapies were coming online for veterans. And now, like, you saw the press release last week with like Ibogaine and stuff like that. But at the time it was very underground. And so I got access to some of that. And that helped me kind of break through a lot of the mental feedback loops and stuff, because I had some survivor's guilt, and I had some
how could you not,
some why me, why did I survive, and so that's a victim story, and I had some of that. And so but all of that got broken through with some of the psychedelic assisted therapy that I got access to. And
you actually had Diego Galde. You don't know him, do you? He operates in that space out of San Diego here, doing exactly that.
Yeah, for veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen,
wonder workers,
lots of miracles. And it's basically, but you asked how does it show up in my life today, or how's it? And so, when you go to those things, like, you can go and have a transformational experience, but it's all about how you integrate it back into your life. And so if there's things that you're wanting to leave behind, like for me, when I had my first experience, which was in 2018, I didn't know that I was going to be stopping drinking again going into that. But I got an experience that kind of scared me straight to where I haven't drank since that, so,
that's powerful.
And then so I'm on like I think 7.5 years no alcohol at this point, and then haven't touched any of the meds either.
Wow.
And
So
so
that's
so that was a life transformational thing, and so I just keep integrating and keep managing my health. Like I going in about a week, I'm going to an isolation retreat for 5 days where I just get locked
where's that at?
in Northern California.
Who facilitates that?
Just
So,
yeah,
we can talk there. Yeah.
Uncle Mike, we call him. But I still put these things into my schedule to where I get like, because I know like I have a tendency to just go, and and I work in the capacity of a performance coach. So I work with several different companies on top of like running my own company and stuff, where it's like it requires a lot of me to be all in when I'm like doing that kind of work. And so I also need to take intentional times to like completely decompress and unload and just close all the tabs and get back to what's important.
Yeah.
So that's how you're going.
Well, I was just gonna say, because I feel like we could spend 2 more hours talking about your past. Like it's a really interesting place. We may have to part 2 this so we can get into that. But I also want to be able to talk about the work you're doing so we can get that part of your story out. I assume you use a GI Bill to go to USC Business School.
So I actually use a benefit called vocational rehab,
Okay.
which is another chapter 31 or whatever it's called. But so I didn't even touch my GI Bill for that one.
You use that for the kids or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just,
Awesome.
I mean, have it saved.
Yeah.
I'm using it right now. I'm doing like a little business course out of University of Miami. That's a global business because I'm still trying to solve some problems with how we grow and scale Deep in Fitness and Underwater Torpedo League.
Yeah. Let's talk about those.
So that and
Because
then
Deep in Fitness comes first, right?
yes. So, but we started them at the same time, and really the basis was, being a water survival instructor for pretty much most of my time in the Marines. I had found that when you gamify the underwater experience, that's when people's confidence
About that.
goes the most, right? And so first, it's like if you're one-on-one, if you can get somebody to focus on something external, then that's the first thing, because a lot of people get stuck in their heads with their fear. And so if you can get them to focus out, it's like that phrase, when in doubt, focus out. If you can get them to focus out, then now you can start to work with them and get them to move. I found basically a gap or a problem for me was I couldn't go out in town and do the training that I had done on base. And that's like the underwater training was the thing that had made me so successful. And also I was kind of banged up. So a lot of the stuff I wanted to do on land, I really couldn't. So I could move a lot better in the water.
Yeah.
So I went to one of my mentors at the time, and I told him about what I wanted to do. And he said, all right, if you can get 2 pools and get insurance and max out participation, then that'd be a successful beta test, and then we can go from there. So that was at the beginning of 2018. We started a pool in Oceanside, California, and one in San Clemente, and basically filled them up in like 2 weeks.
Wow.
Boom.
That's
So,
And what are you training for? Like, what is the outcome that you're looking for?
So we would do an hour of Deep in Fitness and then an hour of Underwater Torpedo League. So Deep in Fitness is like the water confidence, the feeder program to safely move you from like, fresh to being ready to play Underwater Torpedo League, which is a little bit more intense and high level. So that was kind of how we set it up at the beginning. And then it just naturally over time separated itself. So then, there's a mass group that comes just for Deep in Fitness. And then, there's only a certain amount of them that want to play at UTL. So,
you have to deep pools, I assume. This can't be like a 6 or 8 foot pool.
And we've proven out, we've done programs like all the way down to like 4 or 5 feet.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, but really a lot of the benefit from a deep pool comes from the hydrostatic pressure of like going down and hitting the recovery aspect of it. But then there's also the mental side of it that, it's like, if I'm cut off from my air source, well, that's where the training starts. Right.
Yeah.
And so if I can just put my head up, well, then like, I'm not really, it's a different commitment than if I'm down at the bottom of 14 feet and then I'm, working. And then at the end of that, whatever I'm doing, then I have to come up. So it's there's a mental aspect and a performance side. And then there's the hydrostatic, like just the science of what happens when you're deep.
And when say you're 14 feet down, are they doing mental exercise or is it physical? Is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. And really, when you're down there, you're building CO2 tolerance.
Okay.
So typically, the first thing you want to do when you get anyone new in there is you want to establish a baseline of where they're at. And then from there,
just breath holds, you mean?
Yeah, breath holds, or, where their baseline is for CO2 tolerance or breath holding or anything. And then also water confidence, so if someone's at like a 0 on water confidence, well, I need to build that up first before I even start introducing the breath holding and stuff like that. Maybe, right?
Yeah.
But we've worked from everyone, we've worked with like, NFL pro bowlers that had no swimming experience. That was like our first elite package that we did was a 6-week NFL program. The year that we started, we got called to do that. And that's what kicked off our La Jolla program. And then, we've done like the San Antonio Spurs where we had, half of the team couldn't swim. And so, but we only have, 2 hours with them. So they're all going underwater. Yeah. It's just that we've got someone there to rescue them, like, pretty much you got like
one-on-one,
almost a one-on-one.
Yeah.
So
some of those guys you probably need 2-on-1.
Right.
They're big guys.
Yeah. And
are pro athletes your target audience?
That's just for me personally, because the Deep in Fitness has been built out to where now we have like 300 instructors. And
is that a franchise or how does it work?
It's worked through a licensing vehicle, where we license similar to CrossFit. But we also manage some of the programs ourselves, but it's a combination of those two.
What's the biggest outcome or success story that you kind of, attribute to this experience?
There's like a highlight reel for me of all of these different, athletes that came in, or executives or people that came in that, thought that their career was over. Right. And then they started working with us and then they became a world champion, several of those, real success stories. I've got like, one of my best friends, Ryan, he came to us like the first year that we started and he was, cutting boxes in the back of Strike Industries, which is a firearm company, in Orange County. And he basically went from that to like us coaching him and then becoming the VP of the company. He launched like 700 products and then started his own company. That's now like the fastest growing company in that space.
Wow.
So,
so is it the confidence that's being built?
Or? Yeah. Because the water confidence translates to confidence in every aspect of life. So, and for Ryan, for example, like these pro bowlers, they already had confidence. They were pro bowlers. They're already at the top of their game. But once they came to the pool, you didn't see like their confidence really went away quick. But after 4 weeks, you saw them. Now they've started gaining the water confidence, and now it translates to everything. So,
worked with our friends in Alder, huh?
We did we've done an Alder events up in Orange County where we got them in the pool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I chair San Diego. We're on the board of the San Diego Alder.
We need to get that going.
I was going to ask, you don't know Willmeyer, but we're longtime followers of Wim Hof and breathing cold water. How does what you do connect to meditation, and or is there any neuroscience aspect to how this connects to brain health and performance?
The simplest thing for me is like that when you're doing like underwater training or you're doing prolonged breath holding or you're doing stuff, it gets to a point where you feel like you're panicking, right? And so they teach us in water survival that panic is when someone loses the ability for self-help, right? So that's always the worst case scenario, right? Is that you reach that. And I've seen it where, we've one time in La Jolla, there was a bad situation in the ocean where two people needed to get rescued, and I happened to be right there and pulled one lady in, and I still needed to go out and get the other person. And when I got the lady up to shore to where she could stand, and then I needed to go back, she just collapsed and she couldn't stand. It's not that she was paralyzed, but she lost the ability to even stand on her own. So I had to drag her all the way to the beach and then go. And so for me, the breath is a remote control to control our mind. And so that's the biggest thing that I use it for, and the way that I think about it. And that, I do this a lot of time in my talks or my keynotes, or like when I'm coaching people, is I'll put them in a certain breathing pattern, like gear 1, 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out through the nose. And you do that, or you do whatever it is, whatever sequence that you want. But I want you to do that for like 5 iterations. And I want you to notice that you're in control, right? Because like when things go crazy and, and all of a sudden life is chaotic and I feel like I'm out of control. Well, what can I do? I can always come back to where I'm at, and I can always assume control with my breathing. A lot of times, like,
How do you do that underwater?
well, underwater, you're just controlling your mind, right? So you're focusing on something and you're relaxing.
Is there a point, not for somebody just brand new, but let's say somebody's worked with you for a little bit, or they're really comfortable with water, they're decent at breath holds. Is there a point when you're underwater and you feel like you fully depleted it? You got nothing left and you're about to drown. I got to go up. Is there a rule of thumb beyond that point, how much further you can continue to go?
Yeah. So, and this is basically what I've learned from freedivers and people that are really elite with how far they go down underwater and having to really manage their physiological responses, is that when you have that first convulsion and that first urge to breathe, that means you're typically at your halfway point.
Wow.
So for people that
Wow.
it's their first time breath holding and they go underwater and right when they feel that first convulsion, well, they've never felt it before. So their first instinct is to urge to the rush to the surface and get air.
They think they're at the end.
Right. But what happens is then you start to realize, oh, I got more in the tank. So what you can do is when you get that convulsion is you can, slowly count to 5, or you can go back to the song in your head, or you can, count, like I count tiles under the water. It's like I got a convulsion and now I'm like, here's tiles 1, and then next thing you know, after 5 seconds or whatever, that wave of kind of that urge is over, and now you get it, buy yourself another 20 seconds and 30 seconds. So you can keep, but at a certain point you're going to black out. So you have to manage that. And then the thing with us is we always have an underwater safety. So you're never doing underwater training down without somebody there ready to, support you. So,
But is that kind of like when I remember when I was doing scuba diving training, there was like you would hum when you're down low on oxygen, you felt like, I don't know if that was something.
No, but we just do this.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
We do this, and this is the okay signal. But if you're going hypoxic or you're about to black out, then you won't be able to do this, and then you won't also be able to pronounce your F's. So it's this with the hand signal, and then it's I feel fine if you need a verbal. But if they can do that and they can do that, then they're good.
Got it.
It's funny because do some of the Wim Hof breathing, which ends, with 3 cycles of holds. When we work with different kids and stuff like that on it, it's a count. And so like we'll take them on 5 counts and then just slow them into a 2 count 5 and then into a 3 count version of it. And you're just slowing a 5 count down, from 1, 2 to 1, 2 to 1, 2. And there's something about the cadence, that removes you out of your head towards
Absolutely.
You're focused on that and not the body.
Yeah, and the Wim Hof, and that is a completely different style, because when we do an upper regulation breathing, even when we get to the pool, before we get in, we'll do like a gear 4, which is, we'll do that for like about 30 seconds to really turn the engine on and rev up. And then we'll regulate ourselves and cool down, and then we'll get in. But then the rest of the time, we don't ever hyperventilate. And that's the clear distinction for any underwater training is, we don't, hyperventilation dramatically increases the chance of shallow water blackout or any blackout at any depth. So we have to be mindful. And so with the way that we train it is, a lot of people, if you ask them to hold your breath for the longest time, but they miss the important first step, which is dumping all your dirty air and your CO2 completely empty. And then before that, it's just normal breathing patterns until you're getting ready to hold your breath. And then that last one, you dump everything and then full breath, but it's not that would be hyperventilating. Right. I used to do that when I first started because it would turn the signal off that you need air, and it would make it seem like it was easier, but it's actually, that's when the walls would cave in. And that's the only times I had blackouts, was when I hyperventilated. So we all have this mammalian dive response and a survival mechanism in our brain that when we go underwater, it signals us that we need air. We need air. If we didn't have that, well, when you go to the pool, there'd be a bunch of people that are drowned, right?
Yeah.
It's a positive thing. So, but just knowing how to work with it, to your point, right? So you're going to deal with convulsions, but then you also got that going off saying, I need air, I need air. So you have to be able to work with your mind and say, hey, I understand, but my capability, I've only been down here for 30 seconds. Thank you for trying to keep me alive.
Right.
But I'm good. It's like when you're driving in a cold environment and the tire pressure comes on because it's cold. It's like, thank you, but I know that I can still
cold
drive.
all the time. Yeah.
Right.
Well, transition us real quick to the Underwater Torpedo League, because I can't remember, maybe it was Robert Owens who talked about it for the first time. I was just kind of fascinated about what this is.
So Underwater Torpedo League, we adopted it from a sport that we played in the Marines called underwater football, which was basically a full contact underwater sport that we started with, where someone would have to carry a weight across the pool. And then we used, 45-pound plate, and then we used a kettlebell. And then we found that when we used one of those little torpedoes, that was the most dynamic, fun experience. And that those little torpedoes could go halfway across the pool if you threw it right in one pass. And so then everybody's like, it creates a lot of teamwork and a lot of interpersonal communications. But at the end of the day, it gamifies being underwater. So anybody that's scared of it, they turn off thinking about that and they just play the game, and then they get better in the water. And so it was a huge confidence builder. And this is like how we trained our team to go to dive school. We all just played this game, right? And then everybody got really good, and they all passed. And so that was the idea for Underwater Torpedo League, is we looked at the landscape of underwater sports, and since the beginning of time and the Olympics and everything, since it was started, and there was nothing that existed that was this style, right? We did find an underwater football group in Canada that they were playing with this big, it was very different. It was like a big football that was neutrally buoyant underwater that they were using. It was different from the torpedoes. So we initially wanted to call it underwater football, but we ended up calling it Underwater Torpedo League because, and that's the funny thing about the military, is that we would always go and we'd just say, they'd be like, where are we going? We're saying we're going to the pool. We're going to play underwater football, right? No one ever questioned that in the military. But then whenever we got out in the civilian life, it's like, hey, we're going to play underwater football. And everybody's like, where's the football? Right? Doesn't make sense. So we called it Underwater Torpedo League. So 360-degree sport. Attackers can come from any angle. And now we got girls teams, girls on girls. But we run two big competitions a year, one out of Austin, Texas, one out of Orange County. And the content tends to go viral and get a lot of different hits. ESPN is interested in putting UTL on.
No, that's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
We'll see what happens.
Well, did Mia tell you we're gonna throw some rapid fire at you?
No, my whole life has been rapid fire.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You're all fast twitch, man. Yeah, just a few fun questions. Whatever first word or series that comes to your mind, feel free to spit it out there. Gabe, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Let's start with one word your former team would use to describe you.
Stoic.
Nice. I still want to do this at C3. I want to have walk-up songs when people come in, you know, they amp the place up. What would your entry, we got to play it for when we do this podcast. What would your walk-up song be? I feel like he's a banger, like Metallica.
Yeah, like the Skid Row.
Yeah.
Or the Hulk Hogan theme song.
Come out and rip your shirt off.
I'm a real American.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. A purchase that you've made under $100 that's had a meaningful change in your life.
So you can get these intentional stones on Amazon. And so if you just search intentional stones, but every day I go down in the morning, I wake up early, and then I go and I look at all these things and I'm like, all right, what makes the most sense to have as my intention or kind of focus for the day? And so
Oh, I like that.
and you get like, you know, I think I have 40 of these things, but like the thing is it's $30 or something. So this
You
is
pick the one that speaks to you kind of thing?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
an
cool.
intention,
Yeah.
but I also teach my kids to pick a word for the day, which really we're just picking an intention, you know? And
I like it.
but that intention for me, setting intentions is like one of the biggest things that works for me. And I'm also coming from a very dysfunctional kind of upbringing. So anything that I can do to bring function or
It's like a framework
Or
almost, you know?
frameworks.
Yeah, you're like, it's from living on your own to being a part of that military school. You know, you're like, here's how today's going to go kind of thing.
exactly.
That literally was going to be the last question of one thing you should carry on you that most people don't. So we'll skip that and transition to like, what's next in life? I mean, is it continuing to grow or get on ESPN with the Underwater Torpedo League or?
Yeah, so I think that I've been one of the founders and then the CEO of Underwater Torpedo League and Deep in Fitness since we started. So it's coming up on like 9 years at the end of this year. And so
Same anniversary as us. We just had our 9-year anniversary.
yeah. So you know, it's kind of like a gift from God that it's still even alive, you know, with all the crazy obstacles that we've hit and the things that have happened. But
You're kind of like one big walking gift from God. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that could not happen.
exactly. So it's all, you know, and there's a lot to still figure out. So I'm actively working on, you know, what does the future look like, you know, and bringing in some different consultants and some different workshops and stuff that me and the leadership are actively doing to map that out. But other than that, like, you know, I have a book coming out this year called Permission to Heal. I don't know if that was
That's
we
cool.
brought that up.
No, we did that.
But yeah, the initial working title was Unlocking Flow. But then once the publisher came in, they revised it to Permission to Heal. But I basically worked on that for like the last 4.5 years with my friend Bethany Marshall that wrote it. And so that's been a crazy process, but a lot of it is around, you know, turning obstacles into opportunities and like some of the breakdowns into breakthroughs and sharing some of the lessons learned and all that stuff. So
Well, we'll have to have him back on and go through that book. I mean, we had Scott Husing on, who wrote a book about his experience in Ramadi.
yeah,
Became a New York Times bestseller. It'd be fun to have you back on and talk through that book once
it's in July.
released.
So
Okay, cool.
yeah, right around Independence.
We also we just connected. We were with some people in Bosnia and Montenegro and stuff. And C3 has a book club, and the author of that is doing like a fireside chat with the C3 book club and part of promoting her book. So if you're open to those kinds of things, love to read you on that on the backside.
That's really cool.
100%.
Yeah, love it. We're going to cross pollinate after this on a few different things, I have a feeling, but you want to transition us into Discover the Difference?
Yeah, as part of Discover the Difference, the Discover part is kind of, when you reflect back on, really interesting journey, and you're looking back on what you've learned and what your experience, what kind of advice would you give to, your 16-year-old self, knowing what you know today?
As long as you have a really strong why, and you kind of keep your why fortified of like what matters to you the most and why you're doing something. And then you have people in your corner that you can do it, the right people, you can do anything, right? Those are the two biggest things. And then also that, to set boundaries with people, right? Because I'm learning it now at my stage of life, like, it's like you have to set healthy boundaries with people, or else it just, like, mentally, physically, emotionally, you can't keep going. And so I wish I would have had that advice earlier, because sometimes I think I was like in a service mindset, and I'm like, oh well, I'm just gonna I want to be nice to and it's like, but that if people are taking your oxygen mask away from being the best version of yourself, then you don't need them around you.
Yeah.
You can make up a story about whatever it is, but I think the quicker that you learn to have uncomfortable conversations and set boundaries with people, the further that you're going to go. And then, just the signal versus noise. There's a lot of noise everywhere. And the more that you can turn down the noise and declutter everything in your life, the more that you can focus like a laser on the signal of what's important.
Like that.
That's like Dr. Willemeyer neuroscience stuff right there that you just hit on. That's good stuff. The second part's difference. And so the other question is, what's that one thing within you that makes you uniquely yourself, special and different from anyone else?
Jokingly, traumatic brain injuries. But I had, when I was 7, I fell off my roof at my house and I landed on my head, and my whole head was fractured. My skull was fractured. And so it was complete mush, and it took like over a year for my skull to reform. And so I was basically put like in isolation for a year, where I couldn't be with my friends. I couldn't do certain activities. I couldn't, do all that stuff. And I think that was a very interesting thing that happened to me, that kind of set me apart to where I always kind of had dialogue in my head since then, where I was like questioning certain things and thinking about the world and stuff like that. Gave me a deeper introspection. And then when I got blown up in Afghanistan after that, I think, like, as weird as it is, like, because you wouldn't think of those things as blessings, but like whatever the things that happened from those traumatic brain injuries, it basically made me way more empathetic, caring towards other people.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas maybe before I wasn't like that. I was just like a robot that was like, you guys are normies. I don't care what you're doing, like,
Wow.
it really humbled me and, brought me to my knees, and to where now when I'm like, if I'm any person I sit with on the plane or any person that I'm around, I'm like, I have no idea what they're going to say or what could transpire with anybody, because I'm open to anything, because I don't know of anything. I have like pattern recognition and discernment and stuff, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to be around the corner, so
That's
I'm
really
open to it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's amazing perspective to get in life through some pretty traumatic stress, man. That's crazy. Well, for people out there, whether it's a pro sports team or somebody interested in the book that want to connect with you, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
My website, primehall.com, and then or LinkedIn, Instagram, any of those.
All right. I asked you if Prime was your God-given name before the show started. You said yes. Is there any story behind that name, or why Prime?
I had 2 uncles named Prime and
Those were God-given names too.
mhm.
All right.
That's cool.
So
Are they
It's-
studs or?
I never it was never anybody that I connected with. I was like great uncles. But one was PRIME and one was PRYME.
Were they brothers?
No.
Okay, it's not Larry and Larry.
No.
Okay.
That's just the coincidence.
Yeah, but it's funny because when I was a kid, people would say, "Oh, like Optimus Prime," and then now people say, because if I go anywhere, like if I go to a coffee shop or anything or a restaurant, and they take my name, well, they hear Brian.
Oh,
I heard that. Yeah.
And so if they say Brian, I don't. But if I get to a point where I need to tell someone, no, this is Prime, and that they're like, oh, like Amazon.
Yeah.
so I think of prime time.
Yeah, that's what I said to him. I'm like,
But
damn,
we're-
so we
we're,
got in
Yeah,
there.
we were kids of the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I always get, people have their own, version of what they
I
want to
guess now
associate
I guess Prime is
Amazon. Yeah, it's shopping.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, brother. Well, Prime, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Appreciate having you on. It's a great
Thank you
story.
so
Look
much.
forward to having you back again after the book
Yeah.
launches.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. It was awesome.
Yeah, congrats too.
Yeah.